Who is impacted by the unwritten rules of work varies depending on who they are. And as a leader, it's very important for you to know this. So I'm Dr. Anna Kay, and I research the unwritten rules of work for the working class, neurodivergence, and intersections of race and gender. In this playlist, I talk about what the unwritten rules are and how they impact you as a leader. But what makes these rules challenging is they don't impact everybody the same way. In my first research study, I interviewed Black and white women and men who had moved up in social class via employment. And I asked them about what the unwritten rules were, and I came up with the 8 that are in my unwritten rules playlist. I hadn't added neurodivergence yet. That's in my second study that I did last summer that'll be in my book that comes out later this year. But at the end of the interview, I asked them about consequences. What consequences happened when you violated these rules? And there were variations in who said they were impacted by them. We don't usually use percentages when we're talking about qualitative data. So also made sure to show the numbers here, the actual, so you see we're dealing with very small sample sizes. That's why the study I did last summer was quantitative. But you can see here my chart of people who said that they experienced no consequences when they violated unwritten rules. And we also went through the whole interview and coded for any times they brought up consequences or not organically. You can see here the group most likely to say they experienced no consequences was white men, at almost half, meaning that slightly over half still experience consequences, which is nothing to sniff at, and part of why I talk about the importance of class. Followed by Black men, white women, and there was one Black woman who said the same. And this parallels with my chart of people who experience negative consequences. This includes being terminated, denied a promotion, experiencing backlash, bullying, etc. at work because they did not comply with the unwritten rules, or they didn't, and not even intentionally, they just didn't know to. And you can see that it is, again, slightly over half of the white men say that, but nearly everyone else brings it up as well, as that there are consequences. And it's not just my research that implies this. For example, one unwritten rule of work is to be perceived as assertive but not too aggressive. And other studies show that women get told they're aggressive over 2.5 times the amount that men do, particularly Black women. There's also a lot more policing of what is considered professional in appearance: makeup, dress, heels. But again, especially for Black employees, including Black men. The Crown Act has been in Congress for many years for a reason, because straight, slippery hair is considered professional, but it only grows that way out of some people's heads. How can something be unprofessional the way it grows out of your head? That doesn't make sense. A lot of people from working class backgrounds are also told that they're too detailed and they're not seeing the bigger picture. This is also a thing for neurodivergence, when really they're used to looking at things holistically and not necessarily analytically. I have other videos on that. So they're looking at the details and thinking of possible environmental factors that might influence the decision, while middle class and higher people are less likely to do so. So you may dismiss someone for saying they're missing the point, but they could be bringing up valuable information. And in my upcoming book, I give an example of how Target didn't do this and it cost them a lot of money. These different standards all create additional labor and invisible labor that some employees have to do more than others. This increases burnout, attrition, and a rise in competition, because a lot of people end up leaving and starting their own thing because they know they don't have to do that. They can't do this forever. So if you're in a leadership position, be mindful that just because something is the same for everyone does not mean that it's fair. And just because something is bothering a lot of people doesn't mean it's even impacting everyone the same way. But good news here is, if something is bothering a lot of people and it's impacting people disproportionately, reevaluating what that norm is and at least having conversations about it can benefit a lot of people, and maybe some groups more than others, but there's going to be less of a perception of favoritism if it's something that is seen as silly and culturally conflicting for a lot of people. If you find this interesting, enjoy the rest of the playlist. You can also check out my other playlist on the unwritten rules of work. You can subscribe to my mailing list for updates about my book, linked in my bio. And in my next video on this, I'll talk about the business costs of the unwritten rules.